What up, Orca 4th grade? This is our second YouTube video. Read aloud with me, Miss French. Friends, today we are in my favorite reading corner in my whole place. I love this space. I made it nice and cozy for when I just want to sit down and curl up and get away from everyone else and just read a book. So I know that a lot of you have some extra time in your hands. I highly suggest that you make yourself a nice cozy corner where you can sit down and jump into a good book. As you guys know, our good book right now is The City of Ember by Jane Dupont. And just so you guys know, these flowers over here are brought to you by Justin, the guy that came and tormented you guys at the end of Friday Fun one day a long time ago. For those of you that haven't met him, I think you guys might get to meet him someday. He might pop into a video of ours on a Friday Fun Teams meeting or something. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, let's jump in chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Assignment Day. I'm going to be posting some questions that I want you guys to answer. If you guys remember last, we read the instructions where we talked about two characters, the chief builder, and I believe the other one was just a subordinate of the chief builder. A subordinate is someone that works under someone. So, for example, if the chief builder is the boss, the people that work under him, you could sound fancy, and say, oh, those are his subordinates. So it was the chief builder and his subordinate kind of talking about this secret box that they build and how he wants people to be living underground. We don't know why or even how far underground they are yet. But we know that there's going to be a city, and this city is underground. And we know also that this city looks like this. If you want, you can pause the video and study the city. That might be helpful for you guys as we dive into the city and dive into the story and see where our characters go on this journey around the city. That might be helpful. I'll also try and figure out a way to post it. I'm still learning with technical because I've had a lot of technical difficulties with Miss French. Yeah, you're right. Technical difficulties with Miss French. All right, so let's jump into our chapter 1 and please make sure that you comment below the video with all of your answers to the questions. I have 3 questions regarding what did we learn and what do you remember from our recall or from the instructions section, and then I have 3 questions regarding what did you hear and what do you understand about what happened in chapter 1. Okay, all right, so let's get started. Chapter 1, Assignment Day. In the city of Ember, the sky was always dark. The only light came from great flood lamps mounted on the buildings and at the tops of poles in the middle of large squares. When the lights were on, they cast a yellowish glow over the streets. People walking by threw long shadows that shortened and then stretched out again. When the lights were off, they were between 9 at night and 6 in the morning. The city was so dark that people might as well have been wearing blindfolds. Sometimes darkness fell in the middle of the day. The city of Ember was old, and everything in it, including the power lines, was in need of repair. So now and then the lights would flicker and go out. These were terrible moments for the people of Ember. As they came to a halt in the middle of the street or stood stock still in their houses, afraid to move in the utter blackness, they were reminded of something they preferred not to think about, that someday the lights of the city might go out and never come back. But most of the time, life proceeded as it always had. Grown people did their work, and young people, until they reached the age of 12, went to school. On the last day of their final year, which was called Assignment Day, they were given jobs to do. The graduating class occupied room 8 of the Ember School on assignment day of the year 241. This class, unusually noisy first thing in the morning, was completely silent. All 24 students sat upright and still at their desks they had grown too big for. They were waiting. The desks were arranged in 4 rows of 6, one behind the other. In the last row sat a slender girl named Lena Mayfleet. She was winding a strand of her hair long hair down around her finger, winding and unwinding it again and again. Sometimes she plucked at a thread on her ragged cape or bent over to play with her socks, which were loose and tend to slide down around her ankles. One of her feet tapped the floor softly. In the second row was a boy named Dune Harrow. He sat with his shoulders hunched and his eyes squeezed shut, concentrated, and his hands clasped tightly together. His hair was rumpled as if he had never combed it, and he had dark, thick eyebrows, which made him look serious at the best of times, and when he was anxious or angry, came together in the form of a straight line across his forehead. His brown corduroy jacket was so old that the ridges had flattened out. Both the girl and the boy were making urgent wishes. Dune's wishes were very specific. He repeated it over and over again, his lips moving slightly, as if he could make it come true by saying it 1,000 times. Lena was making her wish in pictures rather than in words. In her mind's eye, she saw herself running through the streets of the city in a red jacket. She made this picture as bright and real as she could. Lena looked up and gazed around the schoolroom. She said a silent goodbye to everything that had been familiar for so long. Goodbye to the map of the city of Ember in its sacred wooden frame, and the cabinet whose shelves held the Book of Numbers, and the Book of Letters, and the Book of the City of Ember. Goodbye to the cabinet drawers labeled new paper and old paper. Goodbye to the 3 electric lights in the ceiling that seemed always, no matter where you sat, to cast a shadow on your head as you were writing. And goodbye to their teacher, Miss Thorne, who had finished her last day of school speech, wishing them luck in lives they were about to begin. Now, having run out of things to say, she was standing at her desk with a frayed shawl. The shawl was kind of like the thing that I wore in the first YouTube video we made, clasped over her shoulders. And still the mayor, the guest of honor, had not arrived. Someone's feet scraped back and forth on the floor. Miss Thorne sighed. Then the door rattled open and the mayor walked in. He looked annoyed, as though they were the ones who were late. "Welcome, Mr. Cole," said Miss Thorne. She held out her hand to him. The mayor made his mouth into a smile. "Miss Thorne," he said, enfolding her hand, "greetings, and another year." The mayor was a vast, heavy man, so big in the middle that his arms looked like small and dangling. In one hand he held a small little cloth bag. He lumbered to the front of the room and faced the students. His gray, drooping face appeared to be made of something stiffer than ordinary skin. It rarely moved except for making the smile that was now and a frown. "Young people of the highest class," the mayor began. He stopped and scanned the room for several moments. His eyes seemed to look out from far back inside his head. He nodded slowly. "Assignment day now, isn't it?" "Yes. First we get your education, then we serve our city." Again his eyes moved back and forth along the rows of students, and again he nodded, as if someone had confirmed what he'd said. He put the long bag on Miss Thorne's desk and rested his hand on it. "What will the service be, eh? Perhaps you're wondering." He did this with his smile again, and his heavy cheeks folded like drapes. Lena's hands went cold. She wrapped her cape around her and pressed her hands between her knees. "Please hurry, Mr. Mayor," she said silently. "Please just let us choose and get it over with." Dune, in his mind, was saying the same thing, only he didn't say please. "Something to remember," the mayor said, holding up one finger. "Job you draw today is for 3 years, then evaluation. Are you good at your job? Fine, you may keep it. Are you unsatisfactory? Is there a greater need elsewhere? You will be reassigned. It is extremely important, he said, jabbing his finger in the class, for all work of Ember to be done, to be properly done. He picked up the bag and pulled open the drawing. So, let us begin. Simple procedure. Come up one at a time. Reach into the bag, then take one slip of paper. Read it out loud. He smiled and nodded. The flesh under his chin bulged in and out. Who cares to be first? No one moved. Lena stared down at the top of her desk. There was a long silence. Then Lizzy Biscoe, one of Lena's best friends, sprang to her feet. I'd like to be first, she said in her breathless high voice. Good. Walk forward. Lena went to stand between the mayor. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark next to him. Now choose. The mayor held out a bag with one hand and put the other behind his back, as if to show he would not interfere. Lizzy reached into the bag and withdrew a tightly folded square of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Lena couldn't see the look on Lizzie's face, but she could hear the disappointment in her voice as she read out loud, Supply depot clerk? Very good, said the mayor. A vital job. Lizzy trudged back to her desk. Lena smiled at her, but Lizzy made a sour face. Supply depot clerk wasn't a bad job, but it was a dull one. The supply depot clerk sat behind a large counter, took orders from the storekeepers of Ember, and sent the carriers down to bring up what was wanted from the vast network of storerooms beneath Ember's streets. You think of a giant storage room right underneath the streets of the city. The storerooms held supplies of every kind. Canned food, clothes, furniture, blankets, light bulbs, medicine, pots and pans, reams of paper, soap, more light bulbs, everything the people of Ember could possibly need. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day. A ledger, you guys can think of it as like a running record. It tells you like everything that you've done or everything that you've purchased. So sometimes parents might have it with how they spend their money, and they'd be like, oh, I went to Safeway and spent $5. I went to Maud's Pizza and spent $45. I went to, I don't know, what's another store that you guys are really into? Fortnite store? I don't know. Spent $400. It keeps a record of everything that you've done. That's what a ledger is. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day, recording the orders that came in and the goods that went out. Lizzy didn't like to sit still. She would have been better suited to something else, Lena thought. Messenger? Maybe. The job Lena wanted for herself. Messengers ran through the city all day, going everywhere and seeing everything. Next, said the mayor. This time, two people stood up at once, Orly Gordon and Chet Norm. Orly quickly sat back down, and Chet approached the mayor. Choose, young man, Mayor said. Chet chose. He unfolded his scrap of paper. Electrician's helper, he read, and his wide face broke into a smile. Lena heard someone take a quick breath. She looked over to see Dune pressing a hand against his mouth. You never knew each year exactly which jobs would be offered. Some years there were several good jobs, like greenhouse helper, timeskeeper assistant, or messenger, and no bad jobs at all. Other years, jobs like Pipeworks laborer, trash shifter, a mold scraper were mixed in. But there would always be at least one or two jobs for electrician's helper. Fixing the electricity was the most important job in Ember, and more people worked at it than at anything else. Orly Gordon was next. She got the job of building repair assistant, which was a good job for Orly. She is a strong girl and liked hard work. Vindy Chance was made a greenshouse helper. She gave Lindy a big grin as she went back to her seat. She'll get to work with Clary, Lena thought. Lucky. So far, no one had picked a really bad job. Perhaps this time there would be no bad jobs at all. The idea gave her courage. Besides, she had reached a point where the suspense was giving her a stomach ache. So, as Vindy sat down, even before the mayor could say next, she stood up and stepped forward. The little bag was made of faded green material gathered at the top of a black string. Lena hesitated a moment, then put her hand inside and fingered the bits of paper. Feeling as if she were steps off a high building, she picked one. She unfolded it. The words were written in black ink and a small, careful printing. Pipeworks, they said. She stared at them. Out loud, please, the mayor said. Pipeworks, laborer, Lena said in a choked whisper. Louder, said the mayor. Pipeworks, laborer, Lena said again, her voice loud and cracked. There was a sigh of sympathy from the class. Keeping her eyes on the floor, Lena went back to her desk and sat down. Pipeworks cleaner worked well below the storerooms in the deep, deep tunnels that contained Ember's water and sewer pipes. They spent their days stopping up leaks and replacing pipe joints. It was wet, cold work. It could even be dangerous. A swift underground river ran through the pipeworks, and every now and then someone fell into it and was lost. People were lost occasionally in the tunnels, too, if they strayed too far. Lena stared miserably down at the letter B someone had scratched into her desktop long ago. Almost anything would have been better than Pipeworks laborer. Greenhouse helper would have been her second choice. She imagined with longing the warm air and earthy smell of the greenhouse where she could have worked with Clary, the greenhouse manager, someone she'd known all her life. She would have been content as a doctor's assistant, too, binding up cuts and bones. Even street sweeper or cart puller would have been better. At least then she could have stayed above ground with space and people around her. She thought going down into the pipework must be like being buried alive. One by one, the other students chose their jobs. None of them got such a wrench jobs as hers. Finally, the last person rose from his chair and walked forward. It was Dune. His dark eyebrows were drawn together in a frown of concentration. His hands, Lena saw, were clenched into fists at his sides. Dune reached into the bag and took the one last scrap of paper. He paused a minute, pressing it tightly in his hand. Go on, said the mayor. Read. Unfolding the paper, Dune read. Messenger. He scowled, crumpled the paper, and dashed it to the floor. Lena gasped. The whole class rustled in surprise. Why would anybody be angry of the job of messenger? Bad behavior, cried the mayor. His eyes bulged and his face darkened. Go to your seat immediately. Dune kicked the crumpled paper to a corner. Then he stalked back to his desk and flung himself down. The mayor took a short breath and blinked furiously. Disgraceful, he said, glaring at Dune. A childish display of temper. Students should be glad to work for their city. Ember will prosper if all citizens do their best. He held up a stern finger as if he said this and moved his eyes slowly from one face to the next. Suddenly, Dune spoke up. But Ember is not prospering, he cried. Everything is getting worse and worse. Silence, cried the mayor. The blackouts, cried Dune. He jumped from his seat. The lights go out all the time now. And there's shortages of everything. If no one does anything about it, something terrible is going to happen. Lena listened with a pounding heart. What was wrong with Dune? Why was he so upset? He was taking things too seriously, as he always did. Miss Thorne strode to Dune and put a hand on his shoulder. Sit down now, she said quietly. But Dune remained standing. The mayor glared. For a few moments he said nothing. Then he smiled, showing a neat row of gray teeth. "Miss Thorne," he said, "who might this young man be?" "I am Dune Harrow," said Dune. "I will remember you," said the mayor. He gave Dune a long look and then turned to the class and smiled his smile again. "Congratulations to all," he said. "Welcome to Ember's workforce. Miss Throne, class, thank you." The mayor shook hands with Miss Throne and departed. The students gathered their coats and caps and filed out of the classroom. Lena walked down the wide hallway with Lizzy, who said, "Poor you. I thought I picked a bad one, but you got the worst. I feel lucky compared to you." Once they were out of the door, Lizzy said goodbye and scurried away, as if Lena's bad luck was a disease she might catch. Lena stood on the steps for a moment, gazed across Harkin Square, where people walked briskly, bundled up cozily in their coats and scarves, or talked to one another in the pools of light beneath the gray street lamps. A boy in a red messenger jacket ran toward the gathering hall. On Otterville Street, a man pulled a cart filled with sacks of potatoes, and in the building all around the square, rows of lighted windows shone bright yellow and deep gold. Lena sighed. This was where she wanted to be. Up here, where everything happened, not down underground. Someone tapped on her shoulder. Startled, she turned and saw Dune behind her. His thin face looked pale. "Will you trade with me?" he asked. "Trade?" "Yeah, trade jobs. I don't want to waste my time being a messenger. I want to help save the city, not run carrying gossip." Lena gaped at him. "You'd rather be at the Pipeworks?" "Electrician's helper is what I wanted," Dune said. "But Chet won't trade, of course. Pipeworks is second best." "But why?" "Because the generator is in the Pipeworks," he said. Lena knew about the generator, of course. In a mysterious way, it turned the running of the water into power for the city. You could feel its deep rumble when you stood in Plumber Square. "I need to see the generator," Dune said. I have some ideas about it." He thrust his hands into his pockets. "So," he said, "will you trade?" "Yes!" cried Lena. "Messenger is the job I wanted most, and not a useless job at all, in her opinion. People couldn't be expected to trudge halfway across the city every time they wanted to communicate with someone. Messengers connected everyone to everyone else. Anyway, whether it was important or not, the job of messenger just happened to be perfect for Lena. She loved to run. She could run forever. And she loved exploring every nook and cranny of the city, which was what the messenger got to do. "All right, then," Dude said. He handed her his crumpled up piece of paper, which he must have retrieved from the floor. Lena reached into her pocket, pulled out her slip of paper, and handed it to him. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," said Lena. Happiness sprang up in her. Happiness always made her want to run. She took the steps 3 at a time and sped down Broad Street toward home. And that is the end of chapter 1. All right, friends, even though it's spring break next week, I will also still be posting videos for you guys to watch. But until then, bye. See you on Friday Fun tomorrow.